So, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming, showing out. Here is the definitive guide for how to get better at Riichi Mahjong. I even made it. Ah, jeez. You know what? Whatever. We'll ignore the Steam pop-ups. But basically, getting better at Riichi Mahjong seems like a very simple, easy task. But in reality, everybody says different things. Everybody's got different methods. People will point you to different resources. It can kind of get jumbled in the mix. Depending on who you ask, you may get two completely different answers, two completely different pieces of advice. Some will be the same. It's really hard to navigate. There's a bunch of things. My goal with this presentation is to show you and kind of outline a good guide to follow. In all honesty, this presentation is built towards beginner and then intermediate players. But even if you're past that, there might be some tidbits for you here and there. And at the end, I have kind of things that I'm currently doing as someone who's done all the beginner and intermediate stuff in order to try and push past and do more. So I think that a lot of people can get a whole lot out of this presentation no matter what level you're at. So without further ado, if this will go, if I hit that button, bam! So outlining the general steps for the beginner and intermediate. Beginner is going to be more about forming a basis. What's my baseline? What am I doing? How am I going to play my tables? Good thinking habits. What are the habits I want to build? How do I want to build my mental stamina? Things like that. As well as learning different techniques while playing and incorporating them into your gameplay, doing both of those things. Then once you get into intermediate, you have to get a little bit more into the nitty gritty. You have to learn about scoring. What are my Han values? What's my EV? You have to learn about efficiency. You have to get some basic theory. And then the really important thing for intermediate that you have to start is consistent practice. So, first, the beginner steps. Step one, very simple. Read Riichi Book 1. Now, I know what's going to happen is you're going to go to this website, Riichi Book 1 here. It's free, by the way, written by Dinah Shiba. Completely free. It's a PDF. You open it up, it looks like this. You're going to go to the top, and what you're going to notice is this 278 number. This is you right here. You're going to freak out. You're going to go insane. But something to think about is it's actually not that long. 247 pages of the actual book. So, if you are to look, like not counting this whole table of contents in the beginning as well as the appendix at the end, you only have 247 pages. You can skip to chapter 3 of this book. The first two chapters, if we scroll up here, are just an introduction on how to play with Tenho and then advanced features of Tenho. This was written, I think, or updated 2019, something like that. So a lot of this has been modernized or may not even be the correct thing. This is mainly just can you use Tenho. We have English resources, like there's a plugin that I use, Tenho English UI, things like that. So you could just skip the first two chapters. That means we automatically just shaved off 47 pages. So you could start on page 48. Not only after that, there's about 40 pages that are either blank or the chapter titles or glossaries for terms at the end of chapters. There's a lot of like half pages with space, so you can skip all of those. And at most, there's only about 300 words per page. So if we scroll down, here's an example of that's 1.6. See, look at that. Have to go so far down just to get to the start. Here's a very standard page for Riichi Book 1. Not that many words. It's got examples. This is the really nice thing about it. It's just a lot of examples to walk you through. This is talking about Ishanten versus Nishanten, building your blocks. So it's what would you discard, and then it talks through what decisions you might make and what's good, why it's good. And this is a very simple level. There's not much nuance. It's very, very straightforward. That's the nice thing about it. So when you're starting from zero, it's a very good resource just to get you started, to form a baseline. Again, mostly practice problems. Yes, there's a lot of techniques that it teaches you. It'll do sujis, pairs, sets. It'll talk about value, many things. But After it introduces something, it's just a couple examples to kind of walk you through it and then explaining those examples. So again, seems like a whole lot. I promise you it's really not. And even once you've read it or once you've started it, you can condense it even further. I have a document that I made that is a condensed version of Riichi Book 1 that is just the little graphs and charts and tidbits. For instance, something like this is on there, just about the same size, maybe even a little bigger. That is just the quick chart of, at a glance, here's the shape, what are the acceptance, what are the pairs, things like that. And if you just take all of these things from every chapter in the book, it's a 7-page Google document, and there's a ton of blank space, so in reality, it's probably more like 6 pages. So again, a lot of it's explaining that, helping you, walking you through problems, some of the thought process, and if you want to condense it, you can get to 7. So it's really, really digestible. It's not that bad. On top of that, I recommend pacing yourself as you go through it. We already talked about some of these kind of basic requirements. My recommended practice regimen for Riichi Book 1 is to do about a chapter every 1 to 2 weeks. So on week 1, maybe let's say you're starting out the book. I am right. That's more Tenho stuff. Mahjong Basics, Learning Strategy. I've read some of this. Now, pairs. Let's go a little bit more in depth because that'll be easier. Weights. So this one's talking about weights, Ryanman, Penchon, all that. Talking about 3-way weights, all that. Gets to here. So now I'm at the end of this chapter. I've read 3.4. I'm out of there. Now it goes to chapter 5. So after I've read this chapter, and again, 1 to 2 weeks, just 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, I'm going to play a couple games, and all I'm going to do is focus about my weights. I'm going to be thinking about, okay, how can I improve my weights? How many tiles can I get with a certain type of weight? And I'm going to be looking out for stuff like that. An even better example is this next chapter, the 5-block method, a very fundamental chapter, basically splitting your hand into 5 blocks. So after going through this chapter, doing the examples, reading about it, again, takes about 1 to 2 weeks. Even if I don't get to section 4.3, let's say I stop at 4.2. Now I'm going to play a couple games of Mahjong, I'm going to play a couple games of Ranked Ladder, and all I'm going to do is focus on building 5 blocks in my hand. Every time I play a hand, the only thing I'm going to be focusing on, or most of what I'm going to be focusing on, is what are the 5 blocks in my hand, how am I building out these 5 blocks, how am I approaching them. That's generally what you want to do. Again, take it at your own pace. The nice thing about practice regiments and why I recommend setting them up is it's like a minimum required. Yes, I recommend doing 1 chapter every 1 to 2 weeks, but let's say you got nothing to do week 1. You cruise through a chapter, 2-3 days, you've even played a couple practice games. You think it's easy. Whatever concept's being taught, it's ingrained. You get it really fast. Then you might even want to do 2 chapters in a week. Don't be afraid to do a little extra. Again, the nice part is you can kind of pace it by yourself. And this 1 to 2 week recommendation is just kind of the back wall. It's you never want to touch this back wall, but feel free to go as far from it as possible. You want to do 3 chapters in a week? Go crazy. Sure. But at least do 1 chapter every 1 to 2 weeks. Also, if something happens, you have a busy week, let's say you're going on vacation, you've had a rough week, you're just not hitting any Riichis, nothing's developing, maybe something happens at work, don't be afraid to take a break. Yeah, it's nice to have this training regimen, you want to keep on it, but there's no sense in running yourself down, getting burnt out, kind of stalling out, hitting a hard break, and just dropping it completely. You need to take a couple days break. You need to go a little bit after. It happens. Life happens, right? So that's basically all I have for the beginners. Again, Riichi Book 1 is a Bible. It talks through so many good things. The 5-block method, how to build Yaku, and what to look for. What else? To Riichi or not to Riichi. Riichi judgments, all that. And going back to when I'm talking about baselines, this right here, things like this are why Riichi Book 1 is so good. When you're just starting out, you may not know, okay, I can Riichi, but do I want to? I can call pawn, I can open up my hand, but do I want to? Riichi Book 1 is full of these. Just a quick little chart of here's 3 things you have to meet at least one of the 3 conditions. So from knowing nothing, having no basis, what am I going to do with my hand? Should I Riichi? Do I not Riichi? What are my decisions? Just follow this chart. So does my hand have at least one Han other than Riichi? Does it have a good weight, or am I the dealer? If it does, then I hit Riichi. As you develop as a player and as you play in different settings, that's going to change. This isn't going to be an end-all Bible. Some people like to think of it that way. I personally don't. It's great for beginners, but it doesn't have a lot of nuance to it. So, again, use this as your basis. Start with your Riichi has to follow one of these 3 things, and as you get more experience, as you develop as a player, then switch it up a little bit, add on to it, change where your baseline is, and move it. Don't be afraid to do that. Then once you've really conquered Riichi Book 1, now you need to start getting into the intermediate steps. And this is where things get a little bit more tricky. There's a lot more resources, materials, things to look at. There is a lot to digest, and it's hard to kind of get a foothold in and figure out where to start. The first thing I'd recommend doing is scoring work. So just super simple, the first thing you want to do is you want to learn your more advanced Yaku. You want to learn your Junchans, your Sanshoku, your Chitoi practice. Not only do you want to be able to build more value in your hand, if you're playing on Mahjong Soul Ladder, one of the things that I actually recommend people to look for if they're, for say, trying to get out of Golden Room is building more value in their hand. Learning those Yakus such as Sanshoku, Chitoi, Junshan, working in Dora, things like that can go a long way. As well as that, the other thing I recommend doing really quickly is knowing your common Han counts. Obviously, Han and Fu charts are really, really complicated. Fu is kind of hard. At least know the basics of it. 1 through 4 Han, you need to know, okay, my 30 Han hands for 1 through 4 Han are 1K, 2K, 39, 77. If you can start memorizing Pinfu ones after that, if you play enough, I have 2300, I have 5200 on 3 Han 40, things like that. It's good to do, but at least do your 1 to 4 Han, 30 Fu hands, and know your 5+. The 5+ Hans are probably one of the most important things you can memorize. Know that 5 is Mangan, 6 and 7 are Hanemon, and then 8 through 10 are Baimon and up. Really, at least the Mangan, Hanemon, and Baimon, super duper important. The more you play, the easier that is. Again, these are the most common scores. You're going to see them all the time. The next thing with that comes EV practice. And EV practice is one of the things that you'll start working on now that is something that you will just continue working on throughout your Mahjong career. Now, when I say EV is essentially push first fold. By pushing this tile, what are the odds that I deal in, and how many points is that deal in worth, versus if I win this hand, what are the odds that I can win, and what is the average amount of points I can win with this hand. That is not a very simple thing. That's a hard thing to start with. There's kind of layers to it, and again, the more you play, the more nuance builds with it, the more specific you get with it. What I would recommend for starting EV practice is to work on scoring your own hand, and then my baseline that I recommend to a lot of people is just always assume your opponent has a Bongon unless you are confident otherwise because of some reason, which again will change on the hand or game, maybe even based on the opponent you're playing. But if you assume they have a Mongon, then it's just, do I have a Mongon to challenge? So do I have probably the same chance of winning as many points as I lose? If it's less, then I should fold back, play away. If it's more, then I definitely want to push. It's definitely worth the challenge. Things like that. Again, EV is very complicated. I'll talk about some resources later that might help you with it. But now is the time where I would say, after Riichi Book 1, after learning your more advanced Yaku and common Han counts, that's when you want to start doing EV. The other thing that I think is really, really good to start thinking about is positional play. Positional play for 99% of the Mahjong you play, probably even more, is just trying to play for a certain position. On most ladders, Tenho and Mahjong Soul, not as much in Riichi City because the ladder ranking system's a little bit different. But on Mahjong Soul and Tenho, it's basically fourth avoidance. Meaning that above all else, no matter what happens in a Hanshan, you want to make sure you're not fourth. That means that just getting a first by a little bit versus getting a first by a lot isn't a huge deal, but taking a small fourth versus taking not a fourth is a huge deal. Like getting a fourth in general is bad, bad news. So even if it's a small fourth, you want to treat it as a large fourth. Certain things like that. When you're playing in a tournament, or for instance in ARML, the American Riichi Mahjong League, just any league, if you know, oh, I have to get into the top percentage of players, I need to get a minimum amount of points, I'm going to need a first, or I'm going to need at least a second for that. Oh, I'm 5k down on second, that means I need to hit a Mongon. You want to be thinking about things like that. Um, it's not super black and white. When a lot of people, by the time it hits South 2 or South 3, really start thinking about positional play, I'd recommend at South 3 start thinking about your position. But again, a very good habit, a very fundamental thing to learn while you are playing, to be thinking about. The next thing that you're going to want to start working on and really practicing and implementing is efficiency. Efficiency is just a whole slew of new information. I know Riichi Book 1 talks about it a little bit, but you need to really start getting into the nitty gritty. One of the first things is you want to learn what your efficiency decisions are and when to use them. One of the biggest examples that I like to bring up is when you're dealer. So when you're dealer, you get more points for winning a hand. You also are incentivized because of that to maybe give up points just to get a Hamba at all costs. Hamba at all costs is what I like to say when I'm dealer. So sometimes it might be worth it, instead of going for the most valuable hand, I might sacrifice value just to be as rawly efficient as possible. The more efficient my hand is, the faster it is, and the faster it is, the more likely I am to take a win. Am I going to get the most points for that win? Probably not if I'm playing as fast as possible. But in that situation, it's worth it. Going back to the opposite side of the spectrum, let's say I'm focusing on that positional play. I'm in third and I need to get a first now. Yes, I want to play fast, I want to try to win the hand, but let's say the hand I'm going for that's fast isn't going to be worth that value. Now I might want to sacrifice efficiency to try to build in more Dora acceptance, to build in hands that have a higher chance at Uradora, maybe at splitting my shape up to get more Fu. A bunch of different things that might impact my speed, but because I need more points, it's going to be worth it to do. That's something you're going to want to work into your game plan, something that you're going to want to be thinking about once you get, or once you've kind of conquered scoring a bit more. The other thing that really helps with efficiency is reaching out to the elders. You can't get good and learn this game, in my opinion, unless you talk to people who have been playing longer than you have. You can look at all the stats, you can look at all the things. Talking to other players is the number one shortcut to getting as good as you can quick. Doing what would you do's, where you have a decision to make. Oh, what do I want to do in this situation? Should I be playing efficiency or should I go more for score? What's the most efficient tile? doing log reviews, kind of stepping through your game to where players who are more experienced from you can more easily see, oh, there you had an efficiency mistake. You dropped this 7 mon instead of the 9 mon, and it's important to get that efficiency. Things like that. That is the number one shortcut. That is what you want to start working on. And again, just everybody wants to help you. Everybody wants to participate and watch people grow. Everyone wants to help their club mates. So don't be afraid to reach out, ask people. Everyone's trying to give input, make everybody better, right? For this step, the one book that I would really recommend if you can find it is Gentaro's Tile Efficiency. Here is a PDF of it that I found online. Basically, this is just a bunch of different efficiency problems. It is, okay, in this one, question 2.1, I have this Shabo, this Chun Chun 442, and a 667 Sozumel. What do I want to discard? What's the best discard for me? Well, when you're starting out, maybe your gut is, oh, I want to kill this Tumon. That is the best tile for me. But Gentaro is going to suggest, hold on, the 6-so creates a Ryanman with the other 6-so and the 7-so. So you actually want to discard the 6-so for your perfect Ishanten. Even has this common mistake of trying to prematurely fix this 4-mon as your pair. It's a very good book for starting on more advanced efficiency and thoughts while building hands. It doesn't have as much scoring information. There is some of it, like specifically with Akaari Red 5s, if I remember correctly. I believe it's later on, maybe somewhere down here. Could be wrong. But it's a lot of the raw efficiency things. Just what is the most efficient thing to do? Why should I cut my hand up a certain way? And why it's good versus what I should be aware of why something else is wrong. Things like that. Very, very good resource. Again, it's about 128 pages, a lot of blank space. Mainly examples. Don't do it all at once. Just put a little bit of time in here, a little bit of time in there. It'll go very, very quick. With this, you also want to start getting into your basic theory learning. This is a little bit hard because you have to start really going hard on learning some of the terms. The Japanese terms might be a little bit daunting at first, such as even here I mentioned Kabe, Suji's, Naka, Dora, theory, all that. While they are daunting, there are resources in order to learn what word is what. Like for instance, what comes up to me is the Riichi Wiki that has a list of basically all the terms that you would ever want to know. Even Riichi Book 1 has a glossary in it with an appendix, so you can look up some of those words as well. And as long as you remember what it's talking about, even if you don't remember the actual Japanese word, that's good too. Like Kabe, for instance, is wall. The whole point of Kabe is whenever you see 4 of a tile out, that means tiles closer to it are less likely to deal in because they're walled off. They can't connect on one half. So even if I don't remember, oh, Kabe is having 4 tiles. If I can remember, oh, I don't remember what the word is, but it's the wall technique. That's fine. You're good to go. Learning stuff like that, Sujis, including Naka Suji, Dora theory, etc. All of those are great things to learn. When you should Sakagiri, taking a discard that is unsafe sooner rather than later. Things like that you want to start absorbing, getting into. The more that you interact and kind of watch around with this, the more you'll see of it. So, for instance, watching Mahjong streamers in a language you understand. Armal streams are great for English. Navitas and Light Pink Yoshi are both good English streamers who stream fairly often, who talk about strategy. They're very high level. but kind of picking up some of the things they do never hurts. Just starting to absorb the things they're saying, even if you don't fully understand them, getting the basics of it are super, super good. With that, there are two more things that I would recommend at this step once you're starting to get into theory. Two more resources that are good to look over. The first is Uzaku's tile efficiency. Some of the things that are said when I remember reading this, I didn't quite agree with 100%. But there's a lot of knowledge. This one is much, much longer, 228 blocks. It's more colorful than the other ones. There is a lot going on, but the nice thing about reading something that's this in-depth with so much going on is it puts ideas in your head. One of the best things you can do for Riichi is just getting to thinking about the game as much as possible. You almost want to think of it like a dartboard. Let's say there's a dartboard in front of you and you can't see anything. You're blind. The vision's completely black. You're throwing darts completely in the dark. You want to throw as many darts as possible because even though you don't know where the board is, once you hear that sound, once you stick a dart in the board, you're going to hear it, it's going to click, and then your gameplay is going to improve. Your strategy, whatever, is going to improve. And really the only way to hard set do that is to just start throwing darts. The more you throw, the more chances you have to have something stick. That is the one thing that I did that really helped me when I was starting out. Just the more you think about it, the more chances you have to make a connection. Even when you're like walking around, let's say I'm walking the dog. Oh, I played a game of Armel, or I played a ranked ladder game yesterday, and I had this weird shape of the hand. I had like 2-2, 4-4, 5-7-8. What did I want to discard there? Or something a little bit more complicated, but thinking more about it. Oh, what? I wonder if there's any benefit to doing that. Oh, 4-So's Dora, so I should have probably kept those. But what if 5-So was Dora? Then how would I play it? Kind of playing around with it in your mind and just getting used to thinking about Mahjong is going to help you again make those connections. Just as many mental darts as you can throw to this game, each one has a chance at enlightening you about something that you may not quite have been getting fully before. With Uzaku 2, the other one that's pretty good is Natsuai. I'm not 100% sure what the actual name of it is. This is kind of just a blog. It's got a little bit more.
It's called Super Digital
Super
Mahjong.
Digital. Yes. Thank you, Michael. Super Digital. That's the name. So Super Digital Mahjong is a very common intermediate to higher level resource, and you can see even just from the table of contents, theory not emotion, partially real, but a lot of more kind of in-depth things. For instance, where do you break up a Yakuhai? Tadashi first Sumogiri. If I draw a tile in my hand and I already have that tile in my hand, should I drop the tile that's in my hand to try to give away some information for the table? Or should I just drop the tile that I picked up? That's a very niche thing, but there's an article on it. Kokushi Muso, when I'm going for Kokushi, 13 orphans, camouflaging it. Should I do it? How do I go about it? What does it look like? That is very, what is it? That is something that is, again, very niche, but it's discussed. There's a lot of good things here. Not, you know, a one all be all resource, but the more you read, the more you interact with this, the more chances you have again at picking something up that you can work into your game that'll be really useful for you. With this, the other thing that's really, really important when becoming an intermediate player is consistent play. There is just simply no getting around this. Once you start getting into theory, getting into more of your efficiency, you want to step it up to the next level, you just have to play consistency. There is no cheats on this. You got to log game experience, you got to see a bunch of different things. The more games you play, because Riichi is a variance game, the more patterns start to present themselves to you. And then it's easier to see, okay, I am losing on a bunch of Riichis I'm taking. Maybe I need to drop back and take better Riichis. Maybe I need to reassess when I'm reaching. Maybe I'm dealing in a lot, and I'm losing games because of that. Maybe I need to focus more on defense. The only way to see those patterns in a variance game and reliably see them is consistently playing. Not only that, but the longer you go between playing, the more likely you are to forget things. So if I spend a month off of the game, that's a long time. When I come to pick it back up, sure, I might be able to look at things differently, but now I'm trying to rebrush up. Oh, geez, I got to get used to what this efficiency thing that I was working on was. Oh, the timer's really starting to stress me. Oh, Dora's coming up. Do I want to work in Dora acceptance? Time, Sumagiri. Oh, no, I didn't want to drop that tile. You're going to have to rebrush up. You're going to have to take a week building back up to those, maybe even longer. But if you play consistently, if you keep playing, then you never lose it. All it is you're stacking bricks and then you're building, building, building on top of it. If you go without laying bricks down for a while, some of the bricks might fall off. You might have to stack them back on. The other thing that consistent play really helps with not only recognizing flaws you might have and building up skills, but also uh, with consistent play, varying your play for whatever skill you want to work on is really, really nice. For instance, let's say I want to work on my defense. If I want to work on my defense, what I might do is play Benzen for a little bit. I might just say, you know what, I'm not going to call any tile. I'm just going to play a couple games on ranked ladder. You don't want to play anything that's too casual because then people won't give you meaningful enough practice. That's a whole separate issue. Um, but to work on my defense, I just want to play Menzen. I want to not open my hand at all, and I want to give myself as many tiles to choose from as possible, and I just want to focus on defense. Maybe even I don't want to push against anything. I just want to make sure I can defend against everything reasonable and not deal into anything. Let's say, oh, I am struggling to read my hand. I'm really having trouble when I have a bunch of the same suit when I'm going for these Honitsu Chinitsu hands. Then, as much as I hate to say it, Samba might be a good tool for you. You're only working with two suits. There's a lot more Chinitsu Honitsu hands, a lot more Toy Toy versus Chitoi situations. That Sama is a very great way to practice hand building to an extent, or just getting used to looking at a hand that plays those Yaku. So if I want to work on that, I might go, okay, I'm just going to play some Sama for a couple hours today. God forbid, but you got to do what you got to do. Let's say you're struggling really hard to play with the timer. I'm playing online. I have 15 seconds to make my turn as a bank. With an added 5, I keep timing out within, 6 or 7 discards, and then I'm panicking and making bad decisions as it gets later in the hand. I know that's one of the things that I still struggle on a lot, especially after kind of reducing how many games online I play. The timer gets me good. So, to practice on that, what I might do is I might get used to playing short timer games. I'm just going to play, you get 5 seconds every turn, and you make a discard. It's built into custom game modes for Tenho and Module. I know if you can't find people who you think are, um, what's the word, who are good to practice on, or that won't have solid practice on it, if let's say they're just going to mess around or they're so new it's not worth it because it's not accurate, then you can just go on ladder, and again you just give yourself only 5 seconds to make a decision, and then you got to drop something. That can help you a lot with the timer. And then when you get to a full game, you have that bank, you're used to making decisions with 5 seconds, and then when you get something really hard, then you're just using the bank. You're not using it for the normal decisions. Let's say that you're struggling to build value. You're getting a lot of cheap hands, and you are not building a lot of the high values, so whenever you have a bad deal in, you're not able to remake up that gap. For a while, you may want to boot up and play Mongon minimum. You might want to go into a ranked game and say, you know what? I am going for 4 Han or above every single hand. If it's not 4 Han or above, I'm backing out, I'm folding. Every hand that I build has to be a killer. It has to build up to at least that value. That's a good way to practice building your value. Put yourselves in situations where you have to work on these skills and you have to improve on them. That is a very quick way to improve specific aspects of your game. The other really nice thing about doing that and varying your practice is it keeps it fresh, and when you are improving, you might find that your style of mahjong changes, even just over time. If you are in a plateau and you find that one style of mahjong just shoots you better, by practicing many different styles, it lets you kind of assess the aspect of your game and what you want to do. Like, what happened for me was I felt like I was a very instinctual player for a very long time. It was more about reading the table and sort of the vibes of whether this deals in or whether it doesn't, with, some statistics to it, but mainly going off of personal feeling. And if something felt bad, it wasn't, oh, it's got a low chance of deal in, it was instinctual. Then I started getting boned on. It started going bad. So I said, you know what? I'm going to look into some more stats. I'm going to be a stats player. And for months I said, you know what? Even though I don't feel good about this, the stats say just shove it. I'm going to play consistently with stats. That worked for a little bit. And then I had like 2 of the worst months of Mahjong of my life. And then 3 okay months. And then 2 more of the worst Mahjong months of my life. And now I'm back to where I am now, and I said, you know what? Screw the book. The book lets me down. I hate being a stat player, and I'm going to go back to playing with a bit more instinct. And it's been good. I've been feeling much better about my game. And the only way I would have done that, or I would have known that, is if I tried new styles and really pushed myself to vary what I was doing, what I was trying. If you're varying it every game, unless you're super duper duper good and you have a very, very explicit, specific reason for varying every game, I would recommend against doing that, just because you're going to be all over the place and it's really hard to just on a switch go back and forth from one game to the next game. Doing it gradually and just sticking to one and practicing it, even if you have to switch up, um, which is fine, then stick to that other one that you switch to and just be gradual, be consistent. That way you can really work on it and bring it to the full of your potential. So, with that, I would like to bring up what I like to call the evolution ritual practice regimen. You'll notice this page is red because it is a bloody and battered way of practice that I have done myself. That does suck, but does help you get good. So basically, what I like to call the evolution ritual practice regimen, for a very complicated reason why it's that name, not important, is every day you have to play at least one game. I know that doesn't sound like a lot. Even if you're playing on Tenho, you could get through a full Hanshan in give or take 30 minutes, right? But the problem is that you have to do it every single day, no matter what. Doesn't matter if you had a bad day at work. Doesn't matter if it was raining or shining. Doesn't matter if you woke up at 8 a.m. and then you were busy moving around on your feet until 10 p.m. You have to come home. You have to play one productive game minimum. You cannot stop once. You cannot give yourself even one breather. Again, this is very hard. The other hard part about it is you can't just phone in a game. If you're coming in and phoning in a game, it's not going to do what you want. Anyone can sit down and phone in a Mahjong game and watch something on their second monitor and half pay attention. You're not getting anything from that. You're not doing any practice. You have to actively think about the game. You have to be pushing towards what are you working on. You have to try to make your brain be more active while playing, think about more, be more advanced. You have to really just give your all for at least one game every day. If you have a good game, if you have a good day, maybe it's a little bit more free. Maybe you don't have a lot going on, then you can play more than one game. This isn't a one game every day, it's an at least one game. When I was doing this, I will say I think I got to about 146 days, I want to say 136, somewhere around there, of doing this. I think I had 2 missed days, and that was about it. Um, because of very big emergencies, but I got a lot better. And there were a lot of days where, let's say I had an afternoon off, I would play 4 or 5 games, just to really push myself, really try and think, really work on things. But then you'll have days where it's super busy, where you're doing stuff, and it sucks, especially a week worth of those. When I say literally hell, that's from experience. Once it got to the 120-day mark, and even with it being a part of my schedule, 1 week of coming home every day and every game was bad after busy days and long days and doing a bunch, and then coming home and having a terrible uh, ranked game just broke me. And then I stopped. But even though I stopped, out of that 120 games, there's probably nothing that has done better for me from a strengthening my play standpoint. Other things have helped strengthen my play, but in terms of raw practice and just in a certain stretch of time, how good did I get? Nothing compares to those months where I was doing it. My initial goal was for a year. Your goal may be I want to start it for a month. I want to start it for 2 months. Just go for as long as you can is what I would recommend. Again, not for the faint of heart. I wouldn't recommend this for everybody, but if you're super serious about putting in the hours, about putting in the work, improving as much as possible, this is, in my opinion, the gold standard of what you should be trying to do. Now for some additional improvement advice. Kind of once you've done all that, I would say you're definitely past the intermediate level. You're at the advanced level. While I would like to say, oh, it's the advanced level is just like the intermediate or the beginner, follow these steps and do these things. To be honest, I'm still in the advanced level. The advanced level is, after coming all this way and spending all this time to get here, feels like the starting point. It feels like dipping your toes into the wild again without having a guidepost or without having kind of a set of steps to follow to get past it. But despite that, I would like to recommend some things that have helped me and are still helping me to develop and improve my play. Log reviews. I mentioned them earlier as something you should have started doing when you become an intermediate player, but consistent log reviews go such a long way. They are a great way to highlight mistakes and hold yourself accountable. While you're playing a game, I do recommend that you actively think about discards as you're making them, and even after you make a discard, you might want to keep thinking about it to go, now that I've discarded this, do I want to make the other decision if I get this again? Things like that. That's good, but log reviews are the ultimate way to catch yourself. You never know if while you're playing, let's say person across from you, Toyman, does a Riichi, they throw a tile that's near the door but not the door down. You think it might be a pair. You're thinking about that. A tile comes up and then you go, oh, I got to play something for defense. It might come up if you log review that game that while you were taking all that time and played something that may not have been safe, you actually had a good Genbutsu Mawashi. And then you can go, oh, I should have seen that immediately. I should have been focused on that. Things like that are what you will catch in a log review. Even earlier parts of the hand, just little efficiency things where if you get into the habit of I've got this extended shape, I've got this very common pattern in my hands that I always play a certain way. You might get to it, look at a log review, and then go, why did I discard that? Why do I do that? If I really think this through and think about all my upgrades, the Ukaire, if I think about what value I can get out of it, I should have definitely dropped this other tile. Next time you boot into a game, you might want to keep an extra eye out for that because you've been working on practicing kind of attentive play and working on one thing whenever you put into a game. It'll be super easy to do that. But log reviews, again, super good. Great way to clean up your game, as I like to say. And going back to keeping to use your elders. Everyone wants to get better. One of the things that's nice is they might provide a new perspective to your game. One of the people that has helped me a lot um, as I am improving and still helps a lot whenever I do log review that I love to have around is Korok. Korok, a very strong player. Ho-Oh, very very seasoned veteran from Baltimore. One of the things that I really like that he does during a log review is because he has so much experience and playtime and has seen so much. A lot of the times when he's talking about a decision you make, it's not necessarily whether it's right or wrong. That is part of it. But he might even say, oh, you made this decision and you could have made this other decision. Really, I don't think one is right or wrong. I think it depends on the play style. If you're this play style, you should have gone with this decision. If you're more towards this play style, you're more defensive, then you should go towards this decision. Um, and when I'm playing, I'm never really thinking about things like that. So when you're log reviewing, or even if you do some live play with games and know somebody who's super good, they can just give you a new perspective. If I'm a very aggro player, talking with somebody who is much more defensive, much more value driven, might give me some new enlightenment about what I'm doing. Maybe when I'm aggressive, I'm opening up and I'm leaving myself with less defense. But even while being a closed player, how they approach defense, I might go, oh, that's a smart way to think about it. I'm going to use that in my game. Even though the situations are a little bit different, I still have that sort of baseline. The other nice thing about using your elders is they've been around for a while. They've seen a lot of different things. So while not everybody is going to be able to point you in the direction of something new you haven't seen, something new to kind of build in, everybody is different, right? So the more people you talk to, again, darts on a dartboard, the more chances you have at getting that extra little tidbit, that extra stat that you've been looking for, that is the perfect thing to add to your game, the perfect piece of the puzzle that you're missing to really get to that next level. For this step, a really good resource that I would recommend is actually the Panda blog. Red Panda Master, Viet, very strong player, got to Ho-Oh I think about half a year ago as of this recording. Very good, very stat driven player. Ton of super great articles here, like push fold fundamentals that are very statistically driven. Has some Naga reviews, a tool used for Tenho that talks about efficiency and whether you want to push or fold something or what the best tile to play for a certain reason is. Naga's a robot, so not quite perfect. There's, still some nuance it doesn't pick up, but a very good resource. Viet is a Naga head, and I am probably the opposite play style, so seeing some of the things that I might be missing or that's fundamental to a Naga player still might be good to me. And again, more stats, very good resource.
Did you end up recommending SMS? I didn't catch the whole
I
thing.
so SMS. What do you remember what SMS stands for, Michael?
Statistical
Statistical.
mahjong strategy.
Yeah,
I'm not
statistical
saying that you
mahjong
have to read
strategy.
it,
Yeah,
but
that.
it's like it helps to read Viet's like thought
Yeah,
process if you have some familiarity with that book.
yeah, statistical mahjong strategy is another resource that's very common for people to get pointed to. I didn't recommend it on this just because I think that there are a lot of things you should do before trying to get into statistical mahjong strategy before you get
Oh,
into SMS. Um, and the problem I had when I got to SMS is A, not only is it a very dry book, it's very, very stats heavy. It is very by the numbers, showing the data input, showing why it was input, the method, and the stats. And it's just taken from Ho-Oh games. But also, as I was reading it, basically I felt that a lot of it boiled down to, are you at turn 12 or before? Yes, then just Riichi. And that felt like what a lot of it is. And oh, should I fold or should I push? Well, push is plus EV, so you should just push. And a lot of it boiled down to that in many, many more words than it needs. If you are an intermediate or an advanced player, again, doesn't take a hurt or doesn't hurt to take a look at. It's just for me
yeah.
personally, I
I
was not a big fan of SMS.
I wouldn't throw it at like new players. It's just
No,
like
it.
Viet is like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the Panda blog specifically, it like pairs well with that
Yes.
mindset.
Yeah, if you're a very big stats head, then SMS might be great for you. That might be the perfect thing to just, again, raw data, raw stats. This is what works on paper, captured from games. Definitely doesn't hurt. I wouldn't personally recommend it, but a lot of people do recommend it and are big fans of it. Um, and the other thing, the last thing that I want to recommend is to stay dedicated, and know what you want to do with this game. One of the things that I like to say about this game is Riichi is not about winning or losing. Riichi is solely about one thing. Riichi is about figuring out why you sat down at the table and decided to play it. That answer is going to vary for many, many people. Some people might say, well, I just wanted to see big hands. Some people might say, well, I wanted to enjoy a game with friends. Some people might say, oh, I'm very competitive and I want to be the best I can at this and I enjoy it. Once you figure out what you want with this game, it is much, much easier to set your sights and align what you're doing to get that goal. And that might shift. You might think, oh, I want to be the best that I can be. I want to get to the top. I want to be the best player in the world. And then as you start climbing the ladder, you see, oh, this blows. I do not want to do this. I want to switch my goal. That is totally fine. People change. You'll change as you improve and play. Your goalposts will shift. That's fine. Just know what it is. Think about it. And anytime you do something related to Riichi, remember for it to be in your goal. If your goal is simply to have fun and enjoy and you deal in a lot, then just say, well, I want to have fun and enjoy. I do that by winning hands and I'm fine with dealing in. It doesn't bother me. Or if losing and dealing in bothers you, maybe you want to switch your goal. Maybe it goes, you know what? I want to win. And with winning, I need to make sure to play more defensive. I'm going to align my goals to that. That's something that can be very easy to forget or to get put to the side, especially as you're improving. But having goals and having what you want to do with this game in the forefront can always be kind of your guiding light, your northern star, so to speak. With that, another thing that I would recommend is don't be afraid to take breaks. Burnout is real, especially if you do things like the playing one game every day. So every day has a bit of Riichi, especially if you have a month or two where you're constantly playing and you're going to tournaments and you're going to every meetup. There will come a time, almost definitely, where you get burnt out and you want to step back. That happens. Do not be afraid to take a break. I know that I said try not to take breaks. That's while you're super focused on improving. And usually, when you're starting out, it's a little bit easier to climb and see progress. So it's not as easy to get burnt out. Once you become more advanced, it's harder to see the progress. It's easier for burnout to kind of sink in. It's always better to take a break and come back to loving the game than to force yourself into a terrible marriage with it where the only thing you think about all the time is getting away from it. Again, just do not be afraid to take a break, take a step back. Another thing, plateaus will come, just like getting better with anything. The plateaus will happen. Sometimes you'll be climbing up that mountain. You will be climbing, climbing, climbing. You're going to see the ground get smaller and smaller further away. You're going to go, I'm rising up, I'm feeling good. And then you're going to get tired. You're going to look for grips with your hands and you're not going to find them. Just for some reason, you're not moving up anymore. That's an almost inevitable part for everybody. At some point, you start leveling off. Even if you become the best in the world, then you're going to level off at the best. A little bit of a different situation there. But for 99.99999% of people, they're not going to make it there and they're going to hit a plateau. Or at least they're going to hit a plateau before they make it there. Don't lose hope. It happens to everybody. You got to push past it if you want to get better. Do not let it scare you. Progress is not linear. It's like a roller coaster. There will be ups and downs and loops, and you'll twist and do a bunch of fun, cool things, and sometimes you're just going to be waiting until you go back up the hill. You just got to know that it's not linear, and the only way to see if you're going to keep climbing up is to stay on the ride. The other thing that is more of a personal motif, that is the last thing I want to recommend to people, is the more you do with this game, the more the game does for you. Um, I touched on this a little bit earlier in one of my segments that I was talking about, or one of the points, that the more you think about Mahjong, the more that you can kind of throw darts at the board and intake new things. With that, at least in my experience, one of the things that for some reason just either makes me feel like I have better flow, makes me feel like I like the game more, makes me feel more determined, is interacting with the game and the community. I found that once I started teaching people and once I started kind of putting time into events, trying to get more exposure out, it felt like the game not only rewarded me more, which, obviously cannot prove. I'm not going to say that you always get rewarded for the effort you put in on making events, teaching, doing all that. But also just for myself, it was very rewarding and made me feel like this game was getting somewhere. And that in turn made me more motivated to get better at it. Um, for instance, when I started the DC club, it was originally just me and four other people at the George Mason campus, and they barely played, and it was more just me getting them to put their names down so I could start a club. The first real player who still plays at all with the club, Ray, joined as the sixth member. So not I'm the only one out of the original five members who even still plays the game at any level for the most part, other than maybe like farming dailies on Majul. Um, and then from that, now we're getting consistently 12 people or more on meetups on Sundays. We're running a over 100 player event. We are doing consistent weekly meetups. When I started the club, it was probably every month we might get a table together. Um, and just knowing that all the times of going out to getting, driving out 45 minutes to not even be able to play a game, to teaching people who I see come around all the time now from when they didn't know how to play, things like that can really do a lot to improve your motivation and get you wrapped up in loving the game. And there is no better source of improvement than motivation to play it. The more motivated you are, the more ability you are going to have to improve. Now I do want to have a Q&A. to touch on, but first I did want to go over and touch a little bit more on a log review. Just to do a little hands normally, because I think log review is also just a very important part. Whenever I will load into a log, it'll be something like this. In this case, this is South 4. Normally you start in South 1, but you want to close hands up. You want to turn off weights. If you see something turn gray, that just means that it was Sumogiri. That's not a big deal. But as you're going through, you can reassess your decisions. The one that I really want to point out and kind of go through thought process, take you through what it looks like to review a log in just a very short spread time, is this decision right here. So, to set the tone, the 8 mon is Dora. I really, really want a first here. This is in a league, so getting as many points as possible, especially with where I'm at, is very important. The Earth, the player to the right, Shimocha, is at 40,100 points on their dealer, and I am at 36,900. There's 3 Homba. That means that a 3 Han 20 hand, a 39, or excuse me, a 3 Han 30 hand, a 3,900 point hand will be enough to have me pass dealership. It will be enough to have me take first and end the game. With this hand, I am E Shanten, so I need 1 draw here, or I need something to get me to Tenpai. The shape's a little clumsy. I do have Tanyo outs, but I don't see any 9-sos on the board, and I'm not sure what my odds are of getting a 6-0. The player across from me drops this 5. Now, with my shape, I think it's a no-brainer that I take the 5.
Boom.
So I pawn it. I think that's a very reasonable call. If I'm to skip it, then I'm probably waiting on this 2-5 Suji, which looks terrible against me. There's nothing saying the 2-5 so is safe. And it's not even like they're very cheap on the board. Toyman is dropping a lot of Sozu, but Shimocha and Kamicha aren't really dropping any. So I pawn it, and now here's the decision that even while playing I regretted, but that while something like log review can really help me dive into and think about. I have 2 options here after I've pawned this 5. I can take my immediate Tenpai on dropping the 2 mon or the 5 mon, most likely the 2 mon because it's safe to dealer, and there's a Kabe, there's a wall of the 3s, so the 2 mon, if it were to deal into anything right now, would only be on a Shabo or a pair weight with 2 mon and something else. I could do that, get Tenpai on the 6-so. I might have Furiten problems. If I draw the 9-so, it's going to be clumsy to back up. But I'm in Tenpai, and 6-so may not be the easiest to get from somebody. Or my other option is I could go back a Shanten. I could get the 7 and the 8. I could drop those, potentially pawn the 2, and then I'm waiting on a 2-5 Nobeton. So I'd be waiting on my pair with the 2 or the 5, where the 2 is protected. Yes, there's only 2 left, but they're protected. They look very safe. Or if I draw a 6, a 7, a 5, then I have a Shabo with this 2 and another tile. And while I might be in Furiten on the 6-mon draw, then I have 4s and 7s that I can self-draw still in order to get my end weight. I could even do something crazy. I could do like a Chi and then wait on like a Trap 2 or something. Many options. In this moment, my thinking was, I think I might draw a 9-so. It looks like there's still probably a couple in the wall, and I want to win this hand. And if I draw a 9-so, my chances are pretty much dead. There's only 3 6-sos. Yes, I have all the 5s, but I don't see a lot of 7s. I only see 1 8. Someone might have a 6, 7, 8 show. There might even be a pair of 6-sos. This Monzu shape has a lot of options off of it, a lot of things to play around. I could even draw like a 4 Mon, and I'm set to go. Ton of options in a good Tenpai. So what I am going to do is break Tenpai. That's the decision I made while playing. I ended up regretting this decision later, but in log review, what I could
Boom.
do is I could look at this and rethink. Yes, my Monzu has a lot of great upgrades to it. Not perfect, because the 3 Mon's out, and I have furry 10 chances because of this 1 Mon. But it does have upgrades to it that merit it. The problem is, even with no 9-Sos out, which might even make it more likely somebody has a pair of them, and I don't have to worry about them, because I have just pawned this 5, that means that while there is 7s and 8s to work off of it and one more 5, the 6-So has an extra little bit of protection on it. So while this 6-So is the only tile I can win off of, and it is pretty centralized, I don't see any at all, and I've built this wall to protect it. It's not a full wall, there's a gap in it, but somebody might be more willing to drop the 6 because of it. With seeing that, I think that I should have realized, okay, I need to play for this 6-So, take my Tempai, and just accept it. If I draw the 9-So and become Furry 10, I'll drop the 9-So. Maybe I can Chi the 6, drop a 5. I can do something weird, right? I have options. That being said, I didn't do that, and then as you'll see here, I draw the 6-So, I get punished. I didn't end up getting first this game. But that is just a quick little example of what I'm thinking about when I'm doing a log review, what I'm able to do when I have much more time and when I can think through decisions that I want to make, and actively assess what I'm playing, where my thought process might have gone wrong, and how I should change it if I'm in this situation again. So, very long-winded with the extra example stuck on the ends. Now I want to open it up to the floor. I want to ask if anybody has any questions about anything that was went over today. Anything that they might want to re-go over or have me talk about. I'll give it like another minute or so. If no one can think of anything, again, don't be afraid to ping me in the Discord, reach out to me. That is totally okay. Again, everyone's trying to help everybody. I am totally fine answering any questions. But, oh, you got a question?
Yeah, you mentioned a couple resources that were more focused on really like statistics, math
Yes.
based play.
Mm-hmm.
Are there intermediate advanced resources that are more on the other end of the spectrum?
To be honest, I think that is going to fall under use your elders. Everything that I linked is kind of what is what is standard, like theory books that help, that even if you're on the other side of the spectrum, you can learn a lot from it and work it in. But to be honest, as of right now, there isn't really a good instinctual or other things that an all-encompassing resource that will help you with that more instinct, that more nuance playing the specific table you're at play style. But what
That makes
I
sense.
will recommend for doing that again is talking to people who play similarly or have a lot of experience with it. Um, Korak, who I mentioned earlier, is really good at picking out, oh, there's 2 discards in front of this person in this certain way, and they're Tadashis, which makes me think they have this hand. Steve is another example of a very, very strong player, someone who a lot of people consider to be in the top 5 players in the US. And he will kind of look at discards to play and get vibes on what he thinks a person has from it. And the only way I would know that is by talking to them and interacting with them. If you are more of that type of player, that is what I would recommend for you. the biggest thing that can help you is kind of knowing your strengths and getting comfortable with playing certain hands, and almost knowing more what to avoid. Knowing when you have to abandon your vibes and push because it's super plus EV, or knowing that while you are instinct and you think you'll hit this toy, even though statistically it might not be the best, knowing when you draw a tile or the board state changes that you have to back up a little bit and you have to respect something and fold out the hand. That is the best advice I can give you. I'm sure, again, many of the resources I talked about today will have little tidbits that you can work in that kind of help with that instinct, but really just practicing a hell of a lot and playing a lot and getting used to how other people play and what other people do will also help you as an instinct player, in my opinion.
Yeah, just mainly asking out of curiosity. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I'll touch on it because Michael talked about it. There is a forbidden book called the Flow Book, which does have ramblings of an insane man that some people consider to be the best player in the world, possibly. Where it's things like you can't discard a 3-so as your 7th tile because every time I do it, the wall spits back at me, so I don't do that, and I will do X and Y. Know that doing that is essentially in a video game where you look at horrors beyond your imagination and your character starts to go insane. So consult the flow book at your
Don't
own risk.
don't actually use it for strategy advice, but you can use it for amusement.
Yeah. And I mean, it works out for some people. Even Dustin, who, and it pains me to say this, is a good player in the club, is all in on the Sanso tile, the 3 of bamboo. And I think it's hot nonsense and garbage, but for some reason that tile loves Dustin for whatever reason, and it works for him. Why does Dustin know that? Because he was told about it and played a lot of games and found that that is true and became a believer. I'm against it because I refuse, and I think it's stupid. But again, however you want to do it, the more throwing darts at the board, again, can't say it enough. Just the more darts you get, the more darts you throw, you never know what's going to stick to you. And with that, it doesn't seem anybody else has any questions. Again, if you do think of anything, don't be afraid to ping me, ask for anything. But the presentation is over. I don't really have anything else to add. I've talked through and rambled much more than I probably needed to. But I hope you guys all enjoyed.